the fear of blame can't outweigh the cost of not thinking strategically.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your no-fluff guide to artificial intelligence in higher ed. I'm Mallory Wilsey, bringing nearly 20 years of edtech and marketing expertise straight to your earbuds. Higher ed leaders are expected to master AI overnight, but let's be real, no one has time to sift through every headline, hot take, or research report. That's why every Monday I'll break down what actually matters, fast, clear, and to the point. Want to sound like the smartest person in the room at your next team meeting? You're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Higher Ed Pulse. Today's episode is about the higher ed CMO, more visible, more accountable, and working inside a system built for an earlier version of the job. This year's Simpson-Scarborough CMO study shows the money exists in pockets, the activity exists everywhere, and the operating model still doesn't add up. And my guests are here to unpack what the data says and what leadership still needs to own. Murray Simpson is the Senior Vice President of Growth at Simpson-Scarborough. He works across accounts, marketing, and partnerships, and brings a strong point of view on higher ed, AI, and what bold execution actually requires. Jenny Petty is Vice President of Industry Relations and Advisory Services. She's spent more than 20 years leading marketing, communications, and enrollment strategy in complex university environments, which really makes her the perfect reality check for this conversation. Jenny, Murray, welcome to The Pulse.
Thanks, Mallory.
Happy to be here. Mallory, I love your podcast voice. You've got a great tone for this. I feel like I need to do some retrieval lessons or something.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking Bravo before we hit record, and quite honestly, I'm like, I just want to be Andy Cohen. Like, that's my dream. Like, can somebody please give me a talk show?
To you guys reunions and handle the wives would definitely be an experience.
We based actually at AMA last year. We did on the, not the main stage, but on the exhibitor hall stage, a cool like Enrollify Clubhouse hot takes type panel. And very much like Bravo was the inspiration for that. I like got to live my Andy Cohen dreams. We walked on the stage with our rosé. I mean, and also Jenny, like we have to plug AMA given we're both on the committee. Come on.
We do 100%. Yeah. So AMA coming up in November. Registration is open. Call for proposals is open. We want people to submit their ideas and their proposals for the conference. But also back to Andy Cohen, I've been in some cabinet meetings where I feel like Andy Cohen could have been a good mediator. So maybe higher ed does need more Bravo.
Yeah, the pop culture chaos that's happening in the Bravo universe right now. That would be a whole separate podcast in and of itself. Jenny, I know you've got hot takes on Bachelor Nation drama, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I mean, do we just need a bonus episode to talk about all of this?
I could write a dissertation on the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives at this point. I've threatened to do so.
I'm actually looking forward to it. All right. But while we are waiting for Jenny's dissertation on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, what we do have in our hands and in today's show notes is this year's Simpson-Scarborough CMO study. And this year, it's telling a story about structure. Higher ed has elevated the CMO role faster than it has redesigned the institution around it. 7 in 10 marketing leaders now sit on the cabinet, and 64% report to the president or chancellor. That elevation came with a bigger mandate. The system underneath the role remains fragmented. Marketing dollars live in multiple pockets, teams are spread thin across units, and the reporting lines are uneven. Even with strong cross-campus relationships, coordination, and content sharing keep breaking down, and the people expected to drive growth are rarely controlling the full system shaping it. Recently, Chapter 2 was released, and that sharpens this pressure. Growth is still defined mainly through enrollment and net tuition revenue. 73% of institutions rank that as a top priority, while fundraising sits far behind at 6%. Many respondents said growth has no single owner, and the biggest barrier to achieving it is silos, fragmentation, and misalignment. And that leaves marketing and CMOs carrying enterprise expectations inside an enterprise that still moves in pieces. Today's conversation with Murray and Jenny is going past the top lines and into the harder issues underneath them. If colleges want CMOs to drive growth, what are they actually willing to redesign, fund, and share power over? Murray, chapter 1, let's dig into it. It says marketing leaders have a seat, right? Nearly 70% have that C-level or VP title. 64% are reporting to the right person, the chancellor or the president. 7 in 10 sit on the cabinet. Cool. This all sounds really great, but I keep coming back to this. With more status, with a bigger mandate, the higher ed CMO has a lot of decisions to make and a lot of decisions that are living outside of their control. Has this role been elevated into blame?
Yeah, I mean, I always think about the Spider-Man reference, right? With great power comes great responsibility. And it's definitely something that CMOs, marketers, that we've been advocating for a long time. You know, the CMO study is now on its 10th year. And to see the trend of how many CMOs A, have even C-suite titles, and B, report or sit on the cabinet with the president, it's shot up significantly. I think blame is definitely a concern CMOs have. Jenny and I have seen this. We work with different CMOs across the industry, and you see some in real settings really shy away from taking on accountability when it comes to enrollment, right? They're like, oh, we'll develop the marketing strategy, but let's not put any enrollment metrics in there. And you're like, marketing does impact enrollment. It impacts giving. It impacts reputation. It impacts so many different components. Then to remove something because of a fear of blame isn't the right thing to do. And it's not going to help us reach and attract more of the right fit students. So I think blame is the fear. That's the fear that exists. But I see it more as there being a difference between accountability and responsibility. You know, Mallory, if I was to make you the CEO of a company, would I blame you for everything that maybe doesn't work or goes wrong?
You might.
I won't. I won't. And, you know, am I going to hold you accountable to making sure goals are achieved and that you're leading your team? Absolutely. But blame and accountability are two different things. So, yeah, as I was saying, Jenny and I have seen CMOs worry about incorporating enrollment into their strategic plans and into their marketing strategies. And that's a mistake. And the fear of blame can't outweigh the cost of not thinking strategically. And I think what we're going to see over the next 5-10 years are the CMOs who act with fear and act with boldness. And the ones who are brave and are bold and aren't afraid to show the impact marketing has, they're the ones who are going to be more successful in their roles.
Yeah. Jenny, you were literally sitting in a CMO seat on a campus just months ago. And, you know, building on what Murray's saying, there's a lot of numbers that are shaping what marketing gets judged on. And clearly enrollment is one of those biggest numbers. So when enrollment metrics start to slip, like who's in control? And were you feeling like you were being blamed for those things?
So I think, you know, Mallory, being in that seat and being at a tuition revenue dependent school, facing pressure, the Montana story in and of itself is a case study, right? Coming back from a decade of enrollment decline, had the highest decline in enrollment in the nation of any flagship. So that's what we were digging ourselves out of at Montana. So I would say there's a lot of vulnerability in the CMO role because no one can quite define what marketing is on a campus. And in that case, everything becomes marketing's responsibility. And so you do find yourself when things go wrong, it is the first place a lot of people point to. And I've seen that all across the board. I mean, if I hear one more person say, like, on a cabinet meeting, we just need to be telling our story better. It's like, no, you need to be telling our story better. And you need to be helping me develop products that people actually want to buy. You know, there's so much more there than just pointing at marketing. And so I think marketing communications often picks up a lot of that institutional vulnerability. as, the person who receives the blame or the team that receives the blame. It's an easy place to point to, and it's often easier than doing some of the really hard foundational work that we need to be doing on our campuses. And that's around all sorts of things, designing systems that are strong, designing product that is what the market actually is wanting and is in demand. So I do think it becomes a scapegoat sometimes. And I think it's just one area, growth is just one area that CMOs are feeling vulnerable in, right? You have the political landscape. If you're also, doing the communications role, that is hugely vulnerable work. And so a lot of the time, I think what we see, like Marie's speaking to, that fear just becomes a protective mechanism for CMOs. It's like, if I don't expose myself to this, if I don't take formal ownership of this, I can't be blamed for it. That's not true in reality, but we try.
But it's also a big reason why marketing isn't always getting increase in investments, right? So the more we shy away from actually saying, yeah, we can impact enrollment, the more credibility we're building to have more investment in marketing. See, we can't have it both ways. We can't say invest in marketing, but I'm not going to show how marketing is impacting other areas of the institution because I have a fear of blame. Right. So we have to overcome that hurdle. And that is a cultural shift that has to happen on institutions. And it's not just something that we have to get CMOs doing. It's actually the presidents, it's the trustee board, it's the cabinet, it's everyone.
Yeah. So we're talking about these cross-campus relationships a bit. And the study says 87% of respondents feel that their relationships with non-central marketers are good or even excellent. So I saw that and I was like, ooh, the silos are breaking down, y'all. But then you go a little farther and the study also says there's a 34% respondent rate that content sharing across the campus is poor or fair at best. And if you just isolate out the medium publics from that data, that climbs to 42%. And your webinar that you did recently, called this higher ed nice. And I thought that was great. But this is a governance failure. And I think sometimes we dress it up as, oh, we've got silos or, oh, we're decentralized. But this is a governance failure, right?
It's a governance failure. It's a strategic planning failure. It's in a lot of times a capacity and capability failure of the institution. That's what I'm seeing in a lot of the org assessment work that I do is you have these decentralized teams and they all like each other, right? That's great. They have good relationships with the people. But when it comes to things like content sharing, having measurement frameworks that are used across the board, even having content strategies where you're not having duplication of effort, very basic things are not being governed in a way, or people don't know what decision rights they have. So you have a designer sitting outside of a unit that's well, I think I'm designing within the brand, but I don't know if I'm actually supposed to be doing this work, right? It's simple things like that. So I think for a long time, Mallory and I talked about this on the webinar. We've been talking about decentralized versus centralized. We thought centralized was the golden ticket. I think that was everybody was if we just centralize, we'll have control of everything, and marketing should be in charge of everything. And in reality, most of our campuses are not operating that way. It's more of either a decentralized or a hybrid model. So that's where we've got to start building governance structures that actually work and systems that actually work, because that's the reality that we're in. So less time spending, unless you absolutely, sometimes we have clients who do have a really strong reason why they have to centralize. There's, opt-in budget, right? We're seeing the shared services model on campuses that are looking for cost savings. And that can be a strategic thing, but just to centralize for the sake of centralizing is probably not a good enough reason anymore. And so thinking through the lens of governance, building systems, building operational effectiveness is where we've got to get people thinking.
Marie, are there hard decisions that presidents or chancellors are postponing because the culture within the institution rewards being agreeable?
Yeah, I mean, when we think about the cabinets and the boards, there's definitely a yearning for being braver, right? They want the institution to be braver. They want the institution to put a stake in the ground in what it stands for. But they also, when thinking about that means there's a lot of difficult decisions to make, right? Putting a stake in the ground might mean that we need to reduce the number of programs we have. It might we really need to own a space and lean into something. And with that comes fear. I feel like I talk about emotions a lot, right? But we started by talking about blame and now I'm talking about fear. But there's a fear of backlash. There's a fear of missing short-term enrollment goals. There's a fear of disruption. And that often guides a lot of indecisions, right? And indecisions are actually one of the most costly things that can happen on a campus. So yeah, I think there's probably two areas, Mallory. I think is the program portfolio and whether programs should be offered or discontinued. And Jenny spoke about that earlier. Marketing can only promote something that is needed in the market. Otherwise, it's just an uphill battle. And then organizational design. We're seeing a lot of institutions right now doing org restructures, partly because obviously AI is impacting efficiency and how people work, but also because they're seeing that we can't keep operating the way we have done for the last 20 years. But there's a fear with doing organizational designs. That means potentially removing someone who's been at the institution for 20 years. That means friction. That means someone new. All that stuff has a lot of fear within it. So I think if we can overcome blame and fear, our institutions will do significantly better in the future. So Jenny, we've got a lot of work to do. I'll take blame, you take fear. Let's think of the other seven.
Easy.
Gluttony, let's think of the other ones.
All the sins. Kind of along the same lines, Mallory, I think, higher ed nice is one of my soapboxes right now because I've seen this in real time, right? Like we don't at Simpson Scarborough, we have this saying that I really love. And I think my personality, I'm like 90-day celebration yesterday at Simpson. So I say
congrats.
that I know. Thank you. I know. And it's say the thing, right? So it's like sometimes you're in these conversations where people are like talking around stuff and nobody's addressing things directly. And it's a cue at Simpson. It's like we say the thing. And then somebody is given permission to like do it, right? And I think we need more of that on our campuses we got to just say the thing. Like we got to stop talking around stuff. You got to address that here and you've got to embolden people to have the courage. Like you can't have a CMO who every day is worried they're going to lose their job if they say the thing. That doesn't create an environment for psychological safety where people can do the work that needs to get done.
So chapter 2 says brand awareness and reputation sit in the top 2 growth priorities for 70% of institutions. Brand strategy is the top Marcom priority, with 83% of respondents placing it in the top 3. And chapter 1 has the line that should make, I think, every CMO listening sit up. It says the next decade will hinge on who sees the most, not who spends the most. I want to unpack that a bit. And then your webinar added the data point that most outperforming brands integrate brand and performance, and that over investing in just performance can reduce ROI by 20 to 50%. Like, holy smokes. So Murray, higher ed is clearly saying and reporting that awareness matters, but then we all behave like awareness is optional. So what are campuses doing wrong? Like the campuses that are still invisible, right? Before the student even starts to search, because like, let's be real, paid digital cannot do the whole job, and targeting under 18 students is really, really hard now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're so dramatic in our reports, aren't we? We make all these big statements.
But it's good drama.
Yes, good drama. We love a bit of good drama.
Bravo energy.
We watch a lot of Bravo and we know how this works.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes, well blending, guys.
I'm going to throw a chair at the end of this podcast.
This awareness performance debate has been going on for so long now.
Yeah.
And I think the siloness of enrollment and marketing has only contributed to it more. And actually going back to our previous point, if marketing doesn't show the impact it's having on enrollment and get over the fear and the blame factors, then we're just going to over-index on performance. The way I see it is that if you only ever see media adverts for an institution that is asking you to purchase something, then you're going to get a kick. Right? It's going to make you be like, oh, you're just hard selling to me. And that's not what this industry needs right now. We need to show the value that higher ed has in people's everyday lives. And we're not doing that by telling them to inquire for the MBA program. at the end of the day. So you have to have the balance right. And the gap isn't just visibility, it's meaningful visibility, right? So we could do lots of awareness raising, but awareness is only one of the metrics. When you look at chapter 3, which is coming out on April 23rd, we talk about measurement. And the metric that CMOs get asked most about by their presidents is reputation. And the metric that CMOs struggle to measure the most is reputation. And, awareness is one thing, but really it's about what perception are we trying to change or what reputation are we trying to build and what is going into that awareness message? Because our direct response enrollment media is not serving that function, nor should it. We have to be serving that function. And that's the space that's missing. And a lot of it actually comes from us investing more in speaking to people and speaking to high school counselors, speaking to high school students at a much earlier stage and understanding what they actually think about the institution. Why do they think that way? And what might help move the needle to have them think differently? Awareness might get you to say to someone or get someone to say, yeah, I know that institution. Great. Okay. But yes, I know that institution and they're going to be my top 2 choices because of XYZ. That's the needle that marketing need to focus on more. So, awareness is one thing and is something we need to invest more in, but actually is the content that fuels the awareness, all in the hope of driving reputation.
So Jenny, maybe this is the $1 million question and the sneak peek on chapter 3, but what is it that makes a reputation and awareness investment actually defensible in a cabinet room?
So, what I wanted to add and pile on what Rory was saying, because when you're sitting in front of a CMO or a CFO or a president or a chancellor, right, you have such a limited amount of time to teach them about this world. And they have limited attention spans, right? Their inputs are coming from all over campus. And so I think why performance has swung so wildly the other way is because those numbers get their attention very quickly. And it does become where higher ed marketers can start to make the argument for more investment or can show the tangible effects of the investment. So at the same time, we know that chancellors and presidents are deeply concerned about reputation on campuses. They have to be. I mean, it's almost personal. It is personal in a lot of cases for them. So the more we can do to measure reputation, and we can do that is possible. I think sometimes in higher ed, because we're not used to thinking this way, or we don't have the tools or the budget, we sometimes think it's not possible, but it is. When I worked in the private sector, I worked for a big corporation. We did brand studies every 2 years, right? It was going out. It was looking at market share. It was looking at what consumers were thinking about the brand perceptions. We can do that work in higher ed. It's not that heavy of a lift. So it is possible, but it's getting our teams and our leaders and our presidents to understand that measurement piece is so important to the entire ecosystem. So I think that's how it becomes defensible. But like I said, limited attention span sometimes with educating your cabinet colleagues on this world, because it's so different and so much more complex and sophisticated than most people realize.
So moving towards growth, though, right? Because growth for a lot of your respondents clearly still meant enrollment growth. 73% ranked it or net tuition revenue first, 88% put it in the top 2. Fundraising, on the other hand, sat all the way down at the bottom with only 6% responding. So growth ownership is shared or unclear, and your respondents clearly argue that advancement campaigns are not the highest priority. So when growth doesn't have a single owner, the CMO, I think, winds up carrying all these numbers inside of a structure that wasn't necessarily built for it. So Jenny, I want to push this back to you. Before our sector can get serious about growth, are there things that need to change within the design of our institutions?
Okay, I'm going to give you a super hot take on this, Valerie. This is Bravo. Here we go. I don't think every institution should be aiming to grow. I think we are in a contraction market right now, and I think you have to be strategic about growth. We're all fighting for the same market share. That's going to get harder and harder. We're going to have mergers. We're going to have acquisitions. We already are. We're going to have them at a rate that we haven't seen before. You're going to see closures of schools that no one could have imagined, right? Like, I don't want to be super negative, but I really think we have to be honest about repositioning in a lot of cases. So it's not just growth for the sake of growth. It has to be strategic. It has to be in line with what the institution is actually capable of. You know, it's like, if your budget is getting slashed by your state, you might have to think about managed descent rather than just growth for the sake of growth.
Yeah. I think it's also about redefining what growth means, because some institutions see growth, or most, I would argue, majority of institutions see growth as student numbers. But actually, if you were to look at net revenue, you can increase net revenue by reducing student numbers. You can increase net revenue by closing campuses. You can increase net revenue by mergers and acquisitions. So I think it's just that perception of what growth means, and actually having institutions recognize that it's not always just about increasing student numbers on campus.
I'll share a story. Maybe 10, 12 years ago, I saw a president at a small liberal arts college get absolutely skewered in the media because he put forth a plan that was an intentional downsizing of the institution. He was seeing the enrollment cliff. He was seeing the programs at the institution that were not growing. And he put forth a strategic plan that was going to intentionally, over the course of a 10-year period, scale that institution back to where he felt like, you know, they could continue to sustain enrollment and their top programs. He was skewered in the media. He quite nearly lost his job, but was like clearly pushed out after that. And now, and I won't say the institution, but now that institution, I would be surprised if they still exist in 3 years based off of the fact that their enrollment is about a third of what it was when he put forth that plan. So Jenny, your hot take, I co-sign that all day. We are in a shrinking industry, and like we have to like knock ourselves over the head sometimes with some of the reality of what that's going to mean for our institutions.
And I think we get back to that courage and bravery that's needed to put forth those ideas. I mean, you see the same thing when you've got schools that are dropping down athletic conferences, and how those leaders often get skewered for those decisions. And they're like, I'm doing what's best for this institution. We're talking survival right now. So you know, I do think courage is something that we've got to build more resiliency in our higher ed leaders. Just put that on Marie's and I's list of things that we will tackle in the next, you know, I don't know, year, 2 years.
You know, to keep going on this tangent though for a second, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. You know, I think the rules have changed recently, and I'm noticing a lot of colleges are now becoming universities. What's the play there?
I think it's a prestige play. I would love to hear Murray's thoughts on this too, but I think we're still buying into this idea that prestige equals health and prestige equals longevity. And so for me, I think the meaning behind it perhaps is like it's looking to be more prestigious.
Yeah, we saw a lot when I was working the UK market. We saw so many FE colleges transition into university status, and it was all about prestige. It was about 10 years ago. And they felt like by having the university name, they would attract higher quality students, higher volume of students. And they weren't wrong. It definitely did increase the gravitas of the institution. But when you do that in a constricting market, you're also trying to then compete with a different type of student. So for those who do transition from college to university status, you are then actually opening yourselves up to a completely different market. And that's something that you really have to consider. Yes, you can increase the prestige of your institution, but can you compete against the others that are also university status in the region?
So, Marie, I'm going to stick with you for a second because advancement has been allowed to sit outside the growth conversation for a long time. And it's clear in the data of this survey that it still sits there. Why? Is that the right thing? Like, I have to, like, there are two ways an institution can primarily make money: butts and seats and advancement. Why the heck don't we emphasize the advancement side of the house as much as we do the enrollment side?
Yeah, it's honestly fascinating. And I've learned a lot about this. In the UK market, you don't give money to your institution. That's not a thing. If my university asked me to give them money, I would be like, what? And I was the student body president for 2 years after I graduated. I'm a very attached student to that institution.
Not surprised to hear this.
It's just a different culture here.
Yeah.
And over the last 7 years of living here, I've really seen so much emphasis go into advancement. And we work with a lot of advancement divisions when we're doing a branding project and also as a standalone. And it's really interesting to see how both of those work. When we work with the foundations, they are just structurally very separate. Reporting lines are separate. They might have their own CEO. And then advancement teams often do sit outside of Marcom. I think what we're noticing is this increased recognition that actually advancement and giving is one of the most important brand health metrics. So if an alum is willing to give, they must have had a good experience, or you would assume so. And if you're a school where none of your alum are giving, I think that's a really clear indicator beyond NPS that maybe students didn't have a great time studying on your campus. So I think that recognition is being increased. And also, enrollment has that same cycle. It has the open houses, it has the deadlines, it has the application portals. And advancement can take 20 years to give. And actually, I think that's even more important when it comes to marketing. Nurturing a long-term lead nurture journey, marketing need to be helping advancement with that. Otherwise, advancement are just asking for money. Like, that synergy between the two is actually so powerful. I think it does go back to blame and fear again, though, right? Maybe advancement have fear of marketing getting involved and taking over. Maybe marketing worry about carrying the blame of needing to be responsible for giving rates. But we all know that if they work together, they're going to do a lot better. And, nurturing a lead over 20 years, that is not an easy task and requires so many moments and touch points. So I think we're seeing this move happen over time. I'm hopeful that it's going to continue to be on the CMO's agenda over the next 5 to 10 years. I want that 6% to go up to 30%. Why not? Let's put an ambitious goal in there.
I think we, on the first chapter, we talked a lot about the alignment gap. And I think this is one of those key areas where you have so much alignment debt that accrues between these two areas when they are not connected and aligned. And that's everything from brand positioning, storytelling, figuring out, there's so many. One of the most complex things about the work that we do is just how many audiences there are. I tried to do an audience messaging matrix at one point for my president, and it was ridiculous. It was like a full gigantic Post-it. But that's the work that we need to be working together on. That's where we find alignment. That's where we take those hybrid decentralized models and we really start to get in better alignment around the outcomes.
So as we're closing this one down, Marie, you mentioned that on April 23rd, Chapter 3 is going to drop. Very exciting. Listeners, the show notes include a link to the CMO study page where you can get Chapters 1 and 2 now. Go back on April 23rd, you'll be able to download Chapter 3 too. But hello, let's give people a sneak peek. You got to be in the data. You said it was about measurement. Maybe what's one or two key things from Chapter 3 that listeners can look forward to learning more about?
Yeah, I would say it's the biggest one is the gap between wanting to measure reputation and actually being able to. So in our webinar, we're going to be showing some examples of how institutions have been able to measure that. And we might even have a guest speaker or two coming along to the webinar to help showcase some of those examples. And I would say more broadly, how to create a measurement ecosystem when you are decentralized. Jenny mentioned this earlier, but if you can actually align on the goals, then that can actually help without the need to centralize every single time. So I think that if I was to say two of the hot takes, that's going to be two of the key things we're going to be focused on.
Jenny, any parting thoughts before we wrap this up?
I want to say that despite the headwinds that we're facing, despite how hard the last couple of years have been working in this space in higher ed, we are making progress in this role. We are the professionalism of Marcom and marketing in particular is making progress. And I think CMO's jobs right now is to grab that and continue running with it. That is the job. It's still going to be hard, but we don't do ourselves a lot of favors when we just tell people how hard it is. And I can fall into that trap too of being so hard being a CMO, because it is. but that's also part of the job. So talking about, being courageous and brave, like grab it and run with it. Heated rivalry. We need to talk about this right now because before we started this episode, Mallory, to confess that you haven't watched it.
I haven't.
Which I don't know if we would have said yes to this interview if we had known that.
I don't know if I would have done.
I know.
You have to
This is serious.
You have to watch all 6 episodes. It's not one of those things that you just watch the first episode or the second episode. You have to watch all 6. And I've had Fred's message after episode 2, like, oh, I'm not too sure. And I'm like, you
got to keep going. Because after episode 2, I was like, ooh, I don't know if I'm actually allowed to watch this. I think this might be rated more than I'm allowed to watch.
Yeah.
And then you get to episode 3 through 6, and it is one of the most beautiful
stories ever.
It's like, oh,
my best friend told me that he didn't like it, and he only watched the first 2 episodes. He said, I can't even watch the 3rd episode. Oh, he's just texted me, actually. I'm ignoring him. Like, if that's how you feel, I don't know how this friendship's going to last. In fact, I'm not going to respond to that text message.
Look, I recently found out that my father-in-law is into the fan fiction of Heated Rivalry. All my cycling students are telling me that, like, I am, like an ancient grandma for having not seen this yet. Like, all the Bravo drama, the Bachelorette drama, I'm still on season 4 of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Like,
no,
I got
Mallory,
shit to do.
Mallory, no. Connor Story and Hudson Williams come first. That's your priority right now.
They do.
Connor's story will change your life. I think about him on a daily basis now. Very invested in him, very invested in his life.
I can't wait to check the retention numbers on this back half of the episode. For the record, it's going to be either everybody dropped off 5 minutes ago or like the most, like, people are turning the volume up right now. I'm not sure which.
Yeah.
But anyway, listeners, if you are still here, like we said, episode. See, now I'm thinking in Bravo terms. No, chapter 3 for the CMO study drops on April 23rd. Run, don't walk to the link in the show notes. Marie and Jenny, I mean, like, was this not the most fun episode I've recorded all year?
Fun.
Yes or yes?
It was very fun.
Yes.
It's very fun.
It was a delight to spend some time with you both this morning. And folks, do not forget, head to Apple or Spotify. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. I mean, especially after today's episode, I am sure we're going to get all the 5-star ratings. That is how this podcast continues to grow. And I appreciate you so much. Folks, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.